Hey guys, Lycii here. I'm going to be starting a production series that I'll be doing hopefully every week. It's going to include little tips and tricks of things that I just want to show you guys. As well as that, me and Declan James are going to be starting our next master class, which will be soon. If you're interested, you should get signed up for it. It's decently priced, and we'll be going in depth into how we do literally everything we do. And we'll go into any details on any of the projects that we've done together or any of our solo songs as well, including his new song coming out on Monster Cat with No Taker. I'm sure he'd be happy to share some details with that. So, but without further ado, this video is going to be about layering snares as well as weird sounds and claps. So, yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy. Alright, so I'm going to be going over how I made and layered this snare within my remix of Outer Space. This is what it sounds like. Alright, so I'll be going over this right here. So what I usually try to do is have one snare be the punch, and I want the low end of that to be the main aspect of it. So in this case, I'm using a sampled snare from Barely Alive. So what it sounds like alone without any of the effects on the mass or the bus. And I adjust the fade so that the reverb isn't in there. And so that I'm just getting the punch of it. I'll deactivate this, sorry. It's not being used. On the other layers, I usually go for weird sounds like pots, pans, just something with some weird reverb or really anything like that. That'll give the snare a lot of depth. And so the next layer is this one right here. Let me go ahead and show you without any effects. And so I usually adjust the fades on the other layers so that the transient of the snare is cutting through. On the reverb layers, I adjust the fades so that they're pretty far. Has a really long attack. And then on the clap, I have it a little bit of a faster attack, so that it comes in right after the transient of the actual snare. Or I guess I should say the main oomph, or whatever you'd say of the snare, this portion of it, the body of it. So on this layer, I have some reverb, which is the built-in reverb. I have it set to 45 with the decay time about 5.7 to make it pretty long, so that it really goes for a long time. Next, I have it high passed a little bit on the diffusion, so that it's mainly the high frequencies that are going. And then afterwards, I usually high pass it about 500 hertz or 1 kHz. Then after that, I have some stereo width using the simple delay. And you can adjust this time so that it's 1 millisecond and then 15 milliseconds. That's pretty much my preset every time. And I adjust the dry wet to 100% if I want some width. So it sounds like this without. Yeah, that's off. And then this width. So that gives it a little bit more stereo presence. Next layer, I have the same reverb, glue compressor to kind of even out the entire sound to make these quieter, the quieter aspects of it. So the reverb a little bit louder and more balanced with the actual main part of this snare. So I'll show you without the fade. That's what it originally is. I just adjust it. And then again, this is high passed at 500. And I usually turn down on the reverb layers and the clap. And this is the same sort of thing, but I have the dry wet a little bit higher. I usually try and think of the dry wet as giving it depth, as in pushing it back in the mix rather than towards the front. And on this, I adjust it, so like I said, it's just after the body. And then that all together sounds like this. So those smaller portions are not really standing out. So afterwards, I use on the bus an OTT compressor, which is just over the top, and it's just a preset within Ableton's multi-band compression or compressor. And I usually set that between 30 or 50%. In this case, I have it at 50. And I have RP Verb, which is one of my favorite reverbs for percussion sounds. I have a preset that's snare 1, and then I have that set to 25%, so just a little bit of reverb on it, just to kind of even out all the sound. And then I have it high passed where the main portion of it is. That's the main body. And then I usually just add this to just reduce those really harsh high frequencies. And then afterwards, some bass. It's just a bass punch preset within the glue compressor. And this is pretty much just to boost the volume a little bit. The OTT is what's evening it out. So without it, with it, and without. So this is with the OTT only. And the bass punch is just, the glue compressor is just to give it a little bit of volume. And I always use a soft clip when I'm using it on percussion. And yeah, that's pretty much how I go about layering. And it's really, really fun to mess around with some weird noises, like even sampling just clicking noises just with your tongue or something. I'm really a big fan of doing that for this sort of style, or glass, like windows breaking, just stuff like that. Weird samples really gives your snares some really interesting sounds. So yeah, this is usually how I do it. And then one trick I wanted to mention, so if I had this 4 on the floor, it'd be phasing with the kick so that the kick isn't as prevalent. At least the main punch of the kick, the transient on the kick isn't prevalent. So if I'm doing 4 on the floor, and I usually have 1 to 2 layers, on the main hit, I actually use the delay time right here. I usually adjust it to about -7 or +7, less or more. I never go above 7 or below -7. Otherwise, you get really weird sounds. But pretty much what this does is it makes it so that the main transient on the snare isn't hitting the exact same time. You can do it manually just by moving it. But a lot of the times with snares, I like doing it this way rather than manually moving it. But with claps, I usually manually move it, depending on where it is. So this is what it sounds like if you were to move it -7. So let me go back to here. So rather than hit the transient hitting exactly where the snare is, it's hitting just before, or you can hit just after. But usually it sounds better before. So that's just a quick tip inside of Ableton that you can do to get those snares to punch through if you're doing 4 on the floor stuff. But yeah, hopefully this helped you guys out. If you have any suggestions on other things I should cover, just leave it in the comments. I'm going to be covering a lot of different tips. At one point, I'm sure I'll cover saws and layering them to get really wide sounding saws similar to the one I have in this, which sounds like this guy over here. So yeah, hopefully this helped you guys out. Just leave a comment if you have any suggestions. And yeah, hopefully you guys sign up for the masterclass. I'll leave a link in the description. But yeah, thanks guys.